Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome into another edition of GC Live Talking Tuesday Nights. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuba. Apologize for the little delay. Supposed to start tonight at 7:05, but nonetheless, here we are. And for the next hour plus, we will be talking about Gamecock football, South Carolina. It was a hot one today. Hot one. They wrapped up practice number 5. Feel like temperatures were just under 110 when they were out there today. And if you're watching from Columbia today, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you stepped outside, it felt like a hairdryer was blowing on you anytime you stepped outside. So look, I get it. This time of the year, it's always going to be hot. But at the same time today, and Nick Gargiulo talked about it, transfer offensive lineman from Yale, much hotter weather today than he's ever had to deal with before in his life. But nonetheless, the Gamecocks continue to go to work. So here we are, less than 3 weeks away from the first game of the season. Week 1, September 2nd, North Carolina. In Bank of America Stadium, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that we've talked about, right? Running back room, offensive line, offense as a whole, right? You have a new play caller in Dal Loggins here. Defensive line. Some of the things we've talked about, we've received answers, at least from the players and coaches. And I know that some people are going to be like, well, we have to wait and see. No kidding. However, a lot of what we heard today from Rattler, Gargiulo, Sydney, we can go down the line. A lot of good things from the offense right now. And I think that should excite you based on what we're hearing, because you hear, again, Rattler talking, we'll play the clip. Rattler talking about more explosive plays, more touchdowns right now in comparison to where they were a year ago. That should excite you.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. You should be excited, obviously, heading into week 1. One of the biggest games of the week, College game day, the whole scene, everything there in Charlotte's going to be a lot of fun. So obviously going into that game, there's a lot of anticipation building. Well, there were a lot of questions this offseason about, kind of what this offense would look like. How would the running back room look? How would the offensive line look? And so far, Mike, into camp, they're answering all those questions, right? They're doing everything they can to kind of fill in the gray area and at least seem like a complete team headed into week 1. We know there's obviously going to be weak spots, as there is in every team, but right now they're doing a really good job of kind of shoring up the holes in the boat before you take on, probably the toughest schedule in college football in your first 5 weeks. So, you got to be ready to play week 1 and then, take what you learned from that into week 2 against Furman.
Yeah, we'll go into it. I want to show some of the highlights we have here from, I want to say this was on Friday, Thursday. All these days kind of blend together at this point, but this is from last week, practice number 7 that we're going to pull up here. They were inside when we went to practice. The last time the media was able to go to practice to observe a couple of the periods. This was practice number 7, as I mentioned. And we were able to observe 5 periods. So pull this up for you guys as we continue to talk here. Let's see. Where are we? Share the screen.
Technical difficulties on my end.
There we go. So this is from practice. Like I said, last week, practice number 7 from the Gamecocks. I think at least from the things that I've noticed so far, from practice is that you see Mario Anderson, the transfer running back who stole the show before practice last week. I think the biggest thing that what I've been blown away by is just how in sync it seems like a lot of the transfers are, whether it be the transfers on the offensive line, whether it be the transfers from a wide receiver standpoint, or Josh Simon, right? Talking about from a tight end standpoint. And of course we will talk about Trey Knox. We will talk about Juice Wells. I don't want to seem like I'm burying the lead here. We will get into that. But I've enjoyed at least seeing plus hearing from people close to the program that things are going well from a transfer standpoint, because as good of a job as Beamer has done from a transfer portal standpoint, each year is a different year in the sense that you can't always rely on what happened the year prior to tell the full story of how things are going to mesh and how things are going to gel when you bring in new players from the transfer portal, especially now that we head into year 3. You look at year 1, right? Year 1, it was we got to bring whoever we can just to be able to field a team, right? I mean, players were transferring out left and right. That's just where South Carolina was once they were trying to move on from the Will Muschamp era. Year 2, okay, Beamer gets his feet wet a little bit. He's trying to figure out how he's going to build this program, brings a couple guys in from the portal, and they have success last year. But what does it look like in year 3? Because the talent level, when you look at this roster, is much better in comparison to where it was a year ago. And it's certainly a lot better from where it was 2 years ago. So I bring that up because the gelling when it comes from how do the transfers going to gel with the guys that are currently here, you can't take that for granted. So the fact that you're hearing, Nick Gargiulo is one of the leaders. He is the heart and soul. We'll play that soundbite for you in a little bit. He's the heart and soul of our offensive line. I mean, shoot, that should not be taken for granted. That should not be taken for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, like I said, I think you should be loving everything you're hearing coming from camp. Everyone's, really high on the culture and just everything that they have going for them at South Carolina. And I mean, year 3 expectations, especially after what you did last year and a lot more talent coming back, expectations are going to be high for you year 3 in the Beamer era. But again, this year's a building block. And also, too, I mean, you start to get some of the guys that Shane's recruited once he got here. So you're starting to see the type of player that Shane likes and fits into this system for this coaching staff. And some of these freshmen, I think we'll see Pup Howard quite a lot. And I mean, obviously the offensive linemen, you hope something doesn't go wrong, knock on wood here, but I mean, could see some of them as well. But I mean, exciting stuff going into year 3. Like I said, they're patching up everything in terms of kind of off-season storylines, where they're going to be deep at, where they're not, doing a good job of that. And then obviously the energy is just contagious coming off of this team. Obviously, you guys are talking about it a little bit in the comments, but it really is contagious. And I think that was something you kind of realized out of year 1, out of this Beamer era, out of Shane, just everything, the culture that he's building. So in terms of kind of since it is year 3, we've kind of gotten a sense of what these teams feel like going into this year. And so, I mean, everything on my end, it feels like a Beamer team. And like I said, I think this is good. Like you said, Mike, I think this is the best team that they've had in the Beamer era at South Carolina.
Well, at least on paper, right? At least on paper.
They haven't played down football yet.
It's the challenging part about this team, because we'll talk about the top 25 rankings that just came out, another top 25 ranking that came out, right, with the Associated Press one. But the thing about this team is, yes, they have the talent, and they're more talented, I'd say, in comparison to where they were a year ago and 2 years ago. The problem is they're so young. Overall, they're so young. So when you look at a lot of these positions where they have question marks, right? You look at the offensive line. We've talked about running back. Kerryon Joyner right now is the starter. He is the guy. What does it look like, though, after that? Right? You have Juju McDowell there. You have Mario Anderson. DJ Braswell, the 4-star freshman from the state of Georgia. What will he look like in his first season with South Carolina? What will his role look like? So I bring these things up because I feel like when you're trying to figure out who this team is right now, it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky. And I understand the frustration and, kind of foreshadowing a little bit. I understand the frustration that some people have when they feel like either from a top 25 standpoint or the projections of how South Carolina may finish in the SEC in the East, or just the SEC as a whole. I understand the frustration from the fan base when they feel like they're being slept on a little bit. But at the same time, too, it's because of those question marks. And as something we've talked about before in the past, the reality, the unfortunate reality for both Shane Beamer and just the Gamecocks who weren't even here, there's a stigma. There's a stigma that anytime this program takes 2 steps forward, right, they take 3 back, right? 1 forward, 2 back. Doesn't matter. The progress, every time they go forward, they keep going backwards. They find a way. Year 3, during the Will Muschamp era, that is when South Carolina took a major, major step back, and that was where the nosedive was. So I bring that up because I think this program, in comparison to where South Carolina was heading into year 3 under Will Muschamp, is a hell of a lot further in comparison to where it was then. And a lot of that starts with recruiting. And we've seen that. We've seen that with the success South Carolina has had in the first 2 years with Beamer here. We've seen the success where South Carolina is currently being one of 13 teams in the country that currently has a 5-star commit. And there's a possibility that USC could end up with 2 5-stars when it's all said and done because of how rankings are going to be looked at with their offensive linemen. Because heading into the season, no offensive lineman in the country for the class of 2024 is rated as a 5-star, and that's done on purpose. It allows the high school talent guys to be able to go out there and figure out what's going on. Okay, this is that. So there's a possibility.
There's 2 guys that could possibly become
2 offensive linemen. I'll pull that. I mean,
Cam Pringle and Josiah Thompson, both. I mean, 2 of the top-ranked offensive linemen in the state. So, I mean, I think Pringle will definitely be one, and watch out for Thompson or vice versa. I mean, it's really too close to tell if one of them is going to get it at both. I've seen them both play. I think both of them should be 5 stars, or at least, I don't. If there was a 4.5 star, maybe give it to one of them. But no, both really, 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 really talented guys that probably will flip to 5 stars by the end of this recruiting cycle.
We will get you guys updated as far as recruiting is concerned a little bit. Want to play some of the sound from earlier today. This is following practice number 10. The players met with the media, I'd say around 1:30, 1:35 this afternoon. We had a chance to hear from Spencer Rattler, tight end, Josh Simon, offensive lineman Nick Gargiulo, a couple offensive linemen in there. So I want to play some of that sound from you today, because a lot of the stuff that Spencer said at the beginning of the press conference today, I think it's going to be stuff that Gamecock fans are just going to be, they're going to be salivating. They're just going to be like, oh my goodness, he's saying this, going back to what I was talking about from an offensive standpoint, and how he's very, very pleased with where the offense is. So let's take a listen to Spencer Rattler, and we will have thoughts on the other side.
Spencer, a few new faces on the offensive line. Just as your view from quarterback, how do you see those guys gelling? And are you feeling pretty comfortable behind those guys, even the new spots?
Yeah, the new guys have done a great job. They gel with the group. At a good pace so far. Throughout the summer, they put a lot of good work in. That didn't go unnoticed. We noticed it every day. They put in great work, and so far throughout camp, they're doing a great job.
You're coming off the first scrimmage last Saturday, going to another one last Saturday. What did you maybe like and not like from the offense last Saturday, and what needs to get better going into this next scrimmage?
I liked everything. I mean, we were explosive, threw for a lot of yards. We got down in the red zone, got to finish at a higher rate down there, but we were explosive, had a lot of explosives, protected the ball, didn't have any turnovers. So that's a great thing for, each group.
Shane said after the scrimmage that Omega and Nick have been taking a lot of those first team reps with Juice out. Just what has the connection been like with those 2 guys? What do you like about having them in that spot?
Yeah, definitely. Omega's been a great weapon for us, can go get the ball, high IQ football player. You just got to learn the small little details. Obviously you got Nick, who's just raw, big, fast, still teaching him the ways. But yeah, Omega had a great scrimmage, hit him for a 75-yard touchdown in the scrimmage. And Nick made some plays as well.
Spencer, I know out in Nashville, I talked to you about trying to figure out ways to overcome those growing pains early on in the season, especially with the new offensive coordinator. As we sit here today, just over a week plus into fall camp, how would you assess where you guys are, and what do you feel like you guys need to do as you get ready for week 1?
This is the best camp I've been a part of. Offensively, I love everything we're doing. I don't feel any growing pains myself. The group has been gelling, been playing fast. We have a ton of explosive plays and touchdowns this camp. I mean, way more than last year, for sure. So, I feel like it's a complete turn. But like you said, we got to come out and do it and prove it. So we're just going to keep stacking days, keep gelling, and keep creating that chemistry.
Spencer Nick said he just ate 10 cheeseburgers and the record was broken. I was just confirming that was not you that broke the record. 10 burgers? No.
Mm-mm. No, not me.
And with this offense, we only see clips and whatnot on social media and through practice. How would you kind of describe it for maybe the layman? If someone was just to come up to you and ask what this offense looks like, how would you kind of explain it to them?
That's a good question, but you know me, I can't answer that, man. You got to ask Coach Beamer or Dow that. I love it though.
How's DeCarron spring and through this point in fall camp?
The running backs have looked great. You know, DK is obviously, you know, our starter, and we're going to roll with him. You guys know how he is. He can make any play on the field. Obviously, Juju, DJ Braswell's looked really good. Mario Anderson. Running back room is pretty deep, so we just got to keep feeding them the rock and try to get our run game going.
So there you go. Some of Spencer Rattler's press conference today with the media, and I'm glad, too, you guys got a chance to be able to hear him talk about the running back situation because, look, from what we've seen in those practices, and again, the media were only allowed to be there for about 4, 5, 6 periods. Good things we have seen from DeCarron Joyner at running back. We've seen Mario Anderson do some good things, but it's another thing to hear it from the teammate. It's another thing to hear from the starting quarterback because there's things that we don't get to see. So I think that was just another positive to be able to take away from it all. Now, how did South Carolina look overall in the scrimmage? Obviously, we weren't there, so it's all word of mouth. From everything that I was told, it was your typical first scrimmage. And what I mean by that is there's going to be plenty of things where you can clean up on both sides of the football. However, there were plenty of explosive plays. And as you heard from Rattler there, talking about where this offense is right now, what they need to do moving forward, of course, which is just being able to stack good days off, good days on good days, which is the very generic veteran quarterback response. But hearing him say that this offense is to a point now where he doesn't feel like there's been growing pains. I give a lot of credit to the offensive coordinator because of that, right? Because your job as an OC, especially an OC that's coming in here and you look around and they have the talent, right? Starts with your quarterback. Then it goes out to your wide receiver when Juice Wells is healthy, which again, if you're just joining us, we will talk about that. Then it goes to Trey Knox, your tight end, your transfer tight end, who again, when healthy, we will get into that. And it keeps going out from there. So the whole point being is, and we've heard this before, we talked about this last week, everything we've heard about Dal Loggins since arriving in South Carolina is that he is playing to the strengths of this offense. He is playing to the strengths of his players. You need to do that. You need to do that, especially when you have this guy that's coming back who is a pretty good quarterback, as we saw towards the end of last season, right? In particular, when you make the playbook more player-friendly, you trim down the playbook, and you just let them play. It's amazing what can happen. And it feels like that is what's taking place right now. I don't think that's a coincidence.
No.
I don't think it's a coincidence when you hear him say, oh, more explosive plays, we're having more touchdowns. And then last week we heard about how this offense was just more simple, right? It's more player friendly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this should not shock anybody.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, plain and simple. And we know Dowell's a big NFL guy, and I feel like designing, the offense around your players is kind of an NFL thing, or at least in my opinion. I think this should excite Gamecock fans, just seeing, the players talk so much about how this offense is designed around them. I think, last year the offense, obviously every offense is designed around, the players that are in it, but I think this one's even more so catered towards, players and big plays and just the way that they play too. Obviously Spencer's a really, really explosive quarterback. So you're going to put explosive plays in the playbook. And that's exciting to hear for anybody really associated or a fan of this team, because explosive plays are a lot of fun, Mike. A lot of fun to watch.
And I think too, Joe, what happens sometimes, and I'm not picking on you, but I think some people get so caught up when they hear explosive plays and they instantly think, okay, it has to be a 30-yard bomb downfield or something like that. No. Explosive plays could be designed to be a 5-yard pass, 10-yard pass, right? The setup of the play itself. And I say all this because going back and listening and talking with people that were very close to what was all going on in between those walls last year, and I'm talking about in the meeting room, a lot of the times it felt like, and I'm not trying to pick on Marcus Satterfield because he's not here anymore, but it seemed like South Carolina, and again, talking with people, it felt like South Carolina was trying to do things for the sake of doing it. Kind of like, all right, let's see. Oh, we got this checklist. Okay, we haven't done this yet. Let's do this. And it wasn't always going off of what made sense from a strength standpoint. So I bring that up because this is what this team needs. They have way too many weapons on offense. They have way too many weapons. And I'm not saying that South Carolina's offensive unit, when you're talking about wide receiver room and running back, I'm not saying it's the greatest thing in the country. I'm not saying that. However, and I think this is where we can all agree, when you look back to last season, especially towards the end of the year, when we've heard all these things about how they simplified things, it's amazing how much this team was able to just go out there and have the success that they did.
Yeah.
So that's where it feels like we are right now with what USC is doing. And look, this is the honeymoon phase until they get out there week one. And we've talked about this before. At some point, whether it be week one, week two, whenever, they're going to hit some type of adversity, right? Shit's going to hit the fan at some point. That's football. I don't care for the number one team in the country, right? Go ask Georgia.
From the first 5 weeks, too.
Happens at some point. My whole point is, how is this team going to continue to gel so they can trust their offensive coordinator, right? Because right now, everything's great. So that's why continuing to do this stuff day after day, rep after rep, continuing, and as we'll hear from Josh Simon in a little bit, continuing to build those relationships, that rapport with your OC. And one of the things that Josh Simon said, which we'll hear in a little bit, they, meaning the players, are constantly having dialogue with Dal. And Dal is constantly having dialogue with them. Now, you might say, well, Mike, that happens everywhere across the country. Yeah. But the players are also saying that when they go back to Dal and they say, hey, coach, this is what I'm seeing on the field. Maybe we should run it this way. Maybe we should do that.
Yep.
Dal's doing that. Dal's changing that. That is, again, it all comes down to trust, comfortability, and that's where USC is right now. Looks like we got a question. We got to head right to it. If Philly fans going to throw $10 up, I mean,
Absolutely.
they could buy a burger down in 5 points with that.
Yeah, 100%. But Philly fan, what's up, guys? Mike, do you think DK can carry the running back room? He is a great athlete. It's a good question.
You want to lead it off, Joe? Do you have any thoughts?
Absolutely. I think he's more than capable of it. Like you said, really, really, really talented athlete. He's put on the weight. He looks like an SEC running back. In terms of carrying it, does that mean, taking the majority of the touches and then swinging Juju and Mario Anderson out wide? And if that's the case, I think, that's the game plan going forward. Run that until they stop it or until DK, can't run it anymore. And he's getting stopped. Again, I think he's capable of it for sure. Really, really raw athletic talent. He's put on the weight. And we've seen him, blow through guys and be able to, break tackles and that kind of thing and be physical. So, yeah, absolutely. I definitely think he can. It's a matter of if he will.
The short answer to that is yes. And I can give you the generic response, which I will. But the first response I will, when I break it down, is seeing him in practice. And you mentioned the size. I mean, he's clearly much bigger than he was a year ago. He put on the weight. We've talked about that. The weight, the muscle, the good weight. He looks like an SEC running back. He has the size to play running back in the SEC. There's no question about it. Again, we're only seeing about 5-6 periods in practice. And sometimes it's, thud or just the offense running on air, but just the way he moves and the way he cuts. He's not dicking around. I mean, I'm going back to like when I was a Papuana player, look, stop dicking around, stop dancing, hit the damn hole. He doesn't dance. He just hits the hole. So I say that because that is one of the challenges. You talk to guys like Marcus Lattimore, you talk to some of these former players who've played the running back position. That's one of the things they'll tell you. The players who have either or they're making the move to play running back or they've never played in the SEC. They struggle sometimes with that because when they have the ball, sometimes they will just dance around because the speed is so much quicker. I feel like because of his experience of not playing wide receiver, obviously he was in motion and all that kind of stuff. You get the jet sweeps, but because of playing quarterback and being back there and being used the way they did, right, in the shotgun formation, yes, it could be a little bit different, right? He could be offset. If they want to do pistol, it could be a little bit further back. But the point being is he understands what that looks like.
Yeah.
Right? Now, getting there is a little bit different, right? Could just been back in the day, okay, it's just point A to point B. Now, you need someone to hand it off to you, and it takes a little bit longer. But the whole idea of it is that he understands what that looks like. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons why we've heard the reports as to why he's having the success that he's had so far during camp.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why he is the starting running back. And the other part of it too is just seeing the way he reacts when he's in practice. And he's took on a leadership role too. I do want to throw that out there.
He's always, yeah.
Just seeing him talk with some of the younger running backs during drills. I mean, here's a guy that moved over to running back a couple of months ago, and he's coaching guys up. Now, I know some might look at that and be like, shoot, what does that say about our running backs? I wouldn't look at it that way. I would look at it as, you know what? DK knows how to run with the ball in his hands. Okay? I don't care if you're a quarterback, receiver, running back. At the end of the day, once you have the ball in your hand, it's all relative, right? DK's running behind the offensive line when he's taking a direct snap in Wildcat. What difference does it make if he's getting a handoff, a foot over to the right? He still has to be able to make that cut. But like I was saying before, the game itself, and I've said this numerous occasions, this is where I'm going to end it with it, Philly fan. The game itself has changed so much. You don't need a running back that's going to run the ball 25, 30 plus times a game. And I feel like regardless if DK is your starting running back for the majority of the season, right? For the majority of the season, maybe there's a week that, Juju is the starting running back one week, or maybe Mario Anderson's, whatever the case may be. If Joyner is the starting running back for the majority of the season, I still feel like this will be a by committee running back room. By committee. Every running back in that room, they bring something different to the table. And kind of like a pitcher, right? Who can throw maybe like a 99-mile-per-hour fastball, but then he has a beautiful, beautiful changeup. Has some breaking ball pitches in there. It keeps defenses on their toes when you have running backs that can bring different things to the table. And certainly it helps out more if you can have a guy like DK who can do these things, but he can pass block, right? Mario Anderson can do different things, but he can pass block. If Juju, who Joe has brought up in the past from going back to spring, if he can do these things, but he can pass block. If those guys can go out there and pass block, then being able to throw them out there in different situations, you have that pitcher who can throw different pitches your way, and it's going to keep a defense on the back of their heels.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you'll see a combination of guys, maybe one or two during the game. Obviously, you want to get guys in a rhythm, right? I don't think you'll see the 5-man rotation consistently throughout games. You need to get running backs in a rhythm, running downfield. So primarily you'll see Juju and DK, and then obviously some mix-in of Mario Anderson. But Mike, you want to hit some of these questions before we get to ads and then Simon?
Yeah, no, let's do that.
Sweet.
Let's do that.
So starting with Big Red, is there a set depth chart after the first string guys, or is it going to be another or situation? I think it's going to be another or situation. It's all over college football. It gives them some wiggle room and not be able to commit to a guy. And obviously with the or situations, both guys play a lot.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're specifically asking about running back or just in general. I mean, when I look at offense in particular, there's going to be a lot of ors, right? I mean, outside of Juice, and Juice might be in that boat just because of the injury situation. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Juice and Knox. I don't want people to think that I'm just going to blow over that altogether. But because there's no CBA and players' injuries don't need to necessarily be disclosed, especially heading into week one, there's no reason to say what a player has for a certain injury, for a specific injury, right? In hockey, they use the vague terms lower body injury, and that's what Beamer used the other day when talking about Juice. We'll get into that, but regardless, whether or not Juice or Trey is hurt, I think you're going to see a lot of oars out there. You might even see an oar at the running back position. I mean, even if I think you are gonna see so many oars out there. I mean, we should do an over under, do a little contest here. I have so many freaking Bojangle gift cards I have to get rid of by the end of the year before they expire. Maybe we'll just give 10 away. We'll do an over under on how many oars will be on the week one depth chart.
Yeah, I know a hungry intern that would love some.
I mean, you'll see some on defense too, but I think offense. I mean, could be even some on the offensive line. I think you're going to see a lot of oars.
Yeah, absolutely. Lee asks, how is Mario Anderson not taking the top spot as running back? Well, to answer that question, I think it's pretty simple. It goes back to Philly fans' question. DeCarrion Joyner is in the running back room now. So that's why Mario isn't up there. And I think Juju will be technically too. You'll see the oars.
We've seen Mario, and I don't want to get so caught up with it because, again, it's limited to the big picture of it, which is the media only gets to see X amount of periods. So I think I was doing the math out the other day. Media so far, they're 10 practices in. We've been able to go to 3 practices, 7 periods the first practice, 6 periods the second time we went, and then 5 for the third one. So making sure I do my math right, because if not, people are just going to crap on me, and rightfully so. I was in the C's Get Degrees Club for my academic group, Intern Joe, in college for football. C's Get Degrees. Math wasn't my strong point, but 18. We've seen 18 periods. So we've seen Mario get some work in with the twos. I would expect, regardless of how things play out the first couple weeks of the season, that you will see those running backs kind of going back and forth. But hey, remember this: Mario also has it in an additional year after this.
Yep.
So, yes, while DK could be the starter, not just heading into the season, but for the majority of the season, and fingers crossed that he's able to make that adjustment over and he is your guy, Mario could be in a situation right now where he's battling to put himself on top for next season, right? I mean, you have obviously some very talented running backs that South Carolina has been looking at for the class of 2024. You have Braswell coming in here as a true freshman. We don't know how they're going to use him this year. But if you're Anderson, not only you looking at this season, but what you do this season, USC, he could be the running back next year. He could be USC's starting running back next season. And again, we're not even in the season for 2023 yet. But the point being is I wouldn't lose too much sleep if Mario Anderson isn't the starting running back at some point this season, or, he's not the guy going into the year, because like you said, Joyner has been doing a very good job from everything we've been told.
Yep. Going to Big Red, does not being ranked in the preseason actually work in our favor if/when we beat those ranked teams on the schedule? I mean, for me, yeah, I definitely think so. Personally, I expected them to be ranked just because of the amount of hype that's been building this offseason. Does it necessarily surprise me a whole lot? No, because realistically, I don't think this team should be ranked. Obviously, they've got all their work, is ahead of them, especially in that first 5 weeks. You find out what kind of team you are after Georgia, Tennessee, Furman, Mississippi State, and I believe I'm forgetting one more. So Georgia, and North Carolina, yeah. Mm-hmm. So you'll find out what kind of team you are after the first 5 weeks. So does it work in your favor? Yeah, because obviously, any bulletin board material you'll take at this point, any and all of it. So I think it's definitely motivating them just a little, maybe.
Look, I think bottom line is this, and we've said this before in this program, I think going back to last week, preseason rankings mean nothing. I mean, all it is something to give fans and media members something to talk about, as well as being able to hype up games, especially heading into week one, right? We sit here and we've talked about it. That Saturday is the biggest game of the day when you're talking about college football. And then on Sunday, I would argue, at least on paper, right? Talking about rankings, on paper, the LSU Florida State game is the biggest one week one. It's hard to argue that. You got 2 top 10 teams playing on a Sunday. But as far as Saturday goes, South Carolina versus North Carolina, that is going to be the game of the day.
Yep.
Game of the day. So, look, I think preseason rankings are a joke to begin with. However, looking at South Carolina, and I know we can, what I'm about to say, we can nitpick and be like, oh, would you put Texas A&M over them? Would you put this in? I'm not saying that. I don't have an issue, though, with South Carolina being on the outside. And it goes back to what I was saying before. It's not fair to Beamer. It's not fair to the current players on this roster. But historically, there's a stigma with this program that when they take a step forward, they go back 2 steps. So it is the job of Beamer and the players this year to be able to continue to show heading into year 3 that stigma, it's gone. It's gone. And that they've been able to slowly turn the ship around. They've been able to do that right now. The question is, year 3, can they continue to do that? Because now this isn't little South Carolina, okay? What they were able to do last year, especially at the end of the year, to Clemson, to Tennessee, teams are going to be ready for South Carolina this year. Special teams in particular. And how many times did we mention that last year? I mean, shoot, there's probably 3 games that I could think of off the top of my head right now. A&M, Georgia State, and then the Clemson game. If special teams doesn't show up, USC could have lost all 3 of those games, and they're not bowl eligible. So the point being is, this South Carolina team, if you're pissed off that they're not ranked, I get it. But at the end of the day, let's just call it for what it is. Let's say South Carolina is ranked week 1. They're ranked. Let's, give them that 25 spot. They lose to North Carolina, guess what? They're not going to be in the top 25 the next week. Being 26, being 27th, being whatever the hell they're ranked right now on the outside looking in. They beat North Carolina week 1. Guess what? Guess what's going to happen? They're going to be ranked the following week. So, look, it goes back to the preseason awards sometimes. People get, people friggin' take their pants off and they're, woo, preseason. It means nothing. Means nothing. These top 25 rankings preseason, it means nothing.
Yep.
Beat North Carolina week 1, you're going to be ranked week 2.
Yeah, plain and simple. Going to Big Red again. Question is, can we stop the run? Consistently forcing teams to throw, feeding into a great pass defense. Yeah, I think it comes down to the defensive line. It really, that's the one job that they have this year is stopping the run. That's their primary job. If you can stop the run, the pass rush comes secondary. I think, your edge, you have a lot of talented edge that can get a good pass rush. You just got to stop the run. And then, like Big Red said, the pass defense is really, 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 really good. You have a lot of dogs out there in that secondary, and especially at linebacker too. And I think linebacker is going to help a lot in stopping the run as well. You're really, really, really deep at linebacker. It's probably the deepest I've seen South Carolina in a long time. At linebacker. I know Clayton White's excited about it. Mo Kaba asked him and Stone Clayton about it. And media days, they're all excited just because of how tight-knit it is, and it's a really, really good group. So linebackers are certainly going to play a role, but I think it comes down to the D-line stepping up.
Well, look, it's real easy to just talk about the D-line. I'm glad you brought up the linebackers because that plays – it's 1A and 1B.
Yep.
When you're talking about stopping the run, especially those middle linebackers, it goes hand in hand.
Yep.
However, Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Huntley, those 2 guys in particular, they need to be able to find a way. And it doesn't need to be necessarily like Tonka has to be playing on a level that Zach Pickens was last year. I think Tonka's going to have a phenomenal season. I do think, too, if Boogie Huntley, if Alex Huntley can stay healthy this season, because he showed it last year what he's capable of doing, if he can stay healthy and you have those 2 guys in the middle, because of their experience, because of their knowledge, it's not always, and we've talked about this before, sometimes you have to be the traffic cone out there. Sometimes you're not going to be the guy that makes the tackle. Your responsibility is going to be the one that has to stand there, and you're going to take on the block. You might have to take on 2 blocks. And if you go back and watch tape, not just last year, but going back the last couple of years, and it's not just the defensive line. You could talk about the second level too with the linebackers, but it's, when you're talking about traffic cones, it's usually that first level. Guys were trying to do more than their 1/11th. And because of it, that next level, because they weren't in the right gap on stopping the run, because they were trying to do too much. They didn't want to be the traffic cone. Because of that, the linebackers were out of position. And that's why you saw so many runs get sprung for, 10, 15, 20 plus yards. The defensive line, all right, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be making all the tackles. They don't. They have to just do their 1/11th. If it means being the traffic cone, be the traffic cone. And if they do their job, linebackers, they're not off the hook. We've talked about it before. I love what Stone Blanton could do for this program in the next couple of years. And I'm sure if Stone was here, he would tell you in particular that Vanderbilt game. I can think of one run in particular that he was just out of position a little bit because I think he the way he filled the gap. So I talk about those things because if the defensive line does what they have to do, that's great. That's great. And you have the experience up front to do that between the tackles. The linebackers, they have to make sure they're reading their keys and they're coming down and they're filling the gap the way that they're supposed to as well. It doesn't mean anything if the defensive tackles do their job and the linebackers decide to, you know what, I'm going to attack it this way. No. Trust your eyes.
1A and 1B.
Assignment.
1A and 1B. All right, 2 more questions before we get to these ads. Chris Maples, any truth to rumors that Luke Doty could eventually become a wide receiver?
We haven't heard, at least I can tell you from Gamecock Central, we haven't heard anything about that. I can tell you from again, limited amount of time that we're in there, from the periods that we've been in there, Doty's only been working with the quarterbacks, and he's been working with the number 2s. He's been working with the 2s. So does that mean that the possibility isn't on the table? I wouldn't rule anything out. I mean, he has experience, but based on what I've seen, I don't know exactly how things went in the scrimmage, every little detail, but he's your number 2 quarterback. And while Sellers, we've talked about this before, Lenoris is someone that brings a lot of good things to the table. If God forbid, and I don't use injuries, for example, I don't like to use those for examples. If God forbid Spencer Rattler is ineligible week 1, right? And I always like to use that instead of saying injured. If he's ineligible week 1, who do you feel most comfortable with as your starting quarterback? I'd put Doty in there. You kidding me? I'm throwing Doty in there. I'm going the guy out there that has the experience. So I say that because again, not ruling out the possibility that it could happen, but based on what we've seen, Doty's only been taking reps at quarterback, at least, again, with what we've seen and what we've been told.
Yep. All right, so these 2 are kind of the same question. One from Sandman: can Spencer make a run for the Heisman this year, even against all odds? And Derek Lott asks, how good do you think Spencer Rattler will be this year? So I guess I can lead off going off of Sandman's. I think it's definitely possible. You're going to need to win a lot of games that you shouldn't be able to. I'm talking about Georgia. I'm talking about Tennessee, 2 tough road tests. Got to beat Clemson as well. Winning the Heisman for Spencer Rattler is probably one of the rockiest roads in the country, arguably. You got to go through a really, really, really good SEC East. And, we all know how the Heisman voting kind of works. You have to be on a winning team, or at least a really highly winning team, to at least compete for it. So Spencer needs to have a really consistent year to be in contention for it. I think, if he can play maybe 65, 75% of what he was down that stretch towards the end of the year, I think he can certainly compete for it. Can he win? He's got to have the best season of his life, just like anybody who wins the Heisman. So I think he'll be good. He'll be just sitting outside of, Heisman contention, in my opinion, of, Intern Joe predicting the future. But that's just kind of how I see it. I think, he's got the potential to do it if he has a season of his life. But, we'll see.
Put it this way, the stars are aligned for him to be able to do that, or at least be in contention. But it goes back to what you said. 2 big things. 1, consistency. And the consistency has to be there at the beginning of the season. Has to start that way. If we're talking about Heisman, we're talking about potentially being in the running for the Heisman, you have to be consistent at the start of the year. I'm not saying it doesn't mean you can't play well towards the end. Of course, that goes without saying. But you have to. You have to play well at the beginning of the season. Number two, the team has to, like you said, the team has to be in a position where they're at least knocking on the door of potentially winning the SEC East. With how difficult the schedule is for South Carolina, the competition that they're going up against, there's the possibility of being able to go out there and prove to the Heisman voters why you deserve to be in the mix. In South Carolina, I mean, shoot, we know how difficult the schedule is. There's a possibility, you lose a couple games early on in the year, but if you show that consistency, you're not making, ham bone decisions by just, air ball. Remember some of the interceptions last year? And I know some people are trying to forget that Georgia game. I'm not trying to give you PTSD, but that one interception in particular where Rattler rolled on out to the right, and it looked like he was trying to be like Brett Favre, trying to throw it across the field, and it got picked off. So I bring that up because Rattler really did a good job of limiting the mistakes as the season went on. We noticed a couple times that the wide receivers or the tight ends, right, they didn't help Rattler out always. There were some passes that hit off their hands and they were picked off. But I think bottom line is I think you will see a Rattler that is more locked in this year, who's going to be smarter with his decision making. And if he can be consistent, like you said, Joe, be consistent, put this team in a position just to win these games. Obviously, we said that you want to be on a team that is winning, but if they lose to a Georgia by 7 points or whatever the case may be, and I'm not trying to sit here and be like, all right, moral victories, but when you're talking about the Heisman, you can still look good. You could still look good. And then it goes without saying you have to play very well. You have to play some of your best football down the stretch, and that includes a game against Clemson as well. So can't rule anything out, but definitely, whether it's Rattler or anyone on the South Carolina team, throw Juice in there for crying out loud. I know wide receivers, it's not something that we think about often, right? It's happened before, but throw Rattler, not just throw Rattler in there, throw Juice in there too when we're talking about the potential of seeing a Heisman winner, or at least someone that could be considered this year for the Heisman.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're going to hit a couple ads here real quick before we get to the Josh Simon clip. First off, talk to you guys about our friends over at Liberty Tax. Tax ID is an uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. Tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call the tax team at Liberty Tax. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood. Open 9 to 9 on weekdays, 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start the Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents. And when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Give them a call at 803-462-5576. Once again, 803-462-5576. As Mike tell you about our second sponsor.
Yeah, today's show, as it always is brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond of the Movement Mortgage. Clint not only is the sponsor for all these GC Live shows that you see every day, but he's been a longtime supporter and sponsor of Gamecock Central. Right now, as many of you know, if you're trying to buy a home, it's not the easiest time to do so, right? Those rates are high. Well, here's the thing. Give Clint a call over at 803-771-6933, and he'll help you out the same way that he helped out our very own Wes Mitchell, as well as former Gamecock quarterback and captain Perry Orth. He will do everything he can to get you the best rate, get you the best deal, and do what he can to be able to find you that dream house. So give Clint a call. Once again, Clint Hammond over at the Movement Mortgage. Offensive lineman. I mean, having the opportunity to get to know Nick Gargiulo before he got down here, because my college coach is very good friends with Dante Reno's dad, Tony Reno, head coach of Yale. I heard a lot about this young man before he got down here. what we heard today about him being one of the leaders on the offensive line and just the leadership role that he has took on, it doesn't surprise me, and it shouldn't surprise anyone, especially when you were the only captain. Yale does one captain every year. He was the only captain for Yale last year. And that Yale team, I think the year before, they won the Patriot League title. I can't remember if they won it last year or not. Sorry to our Ivy League followers. I can't say that I keep up every year with the Ivy League. But point being is he has been a leader in the past. And when you come here, sometimes you step on those eggshells because you're afraid, right? You're like, all right, I'm the new guy, but at the same time, too, like, I'm a leader. What do I do? He's well past that now. He's well past that. And just hearing some of the things that he had to say today, it should excite you about where this team is. Now, there's a couple things that I want to play. I'm going to play the part about the offensive line first. And then we will go into talking about some mystery that involves Nick Gargiulo as far as burgers are concerned. And I'll explain what that means in a little bit. But here's Nick Gargiulo from earlier today. Talking also about the Heat. We talked about the Heat first.
It's relatively easy. What's up, Mike?
How we doing, Nick?
Good.
You getting used to this Southern heat?
So I thought everyone was lying to me because I made it through the whole summer. I was fine. But the past 2 days of practice, wow. You walk out there, you're already sweating.
Yeah, a little bit warmer than New Haven.
Yeah.
We spoke about it the first on USC Media Day, the day before practice, and just what you thought the offensive line needed to do in order to be able to mesh and come together. How have you seen things grow from day one of practice in comparison to now, and what do you think still needs to be done in order to get you guys ready for week one?
It's an excellent question. I think we've improved a lot we've improved a lot in individual work. So, whether that's any sort of block, whether it's a reach block, a drive block, on how you pull, how you pass protect, I think individually we've all seen major improvement. And now it's, can we take those individual improvements and bring them to team periods? And so, I think when we spoke last, I was like, the whole point of fall camp is to struggle and to expose things that you're bad at. And so over the course of the past 2 weeks, we've exposed things that we're bad at and continue to work on. So.
Since Sydney said a lot of nice things about you, what are some good things you can say about him and what he brings to this group?
I think Sydney's a heck of a pass protector. And I think you guys will see that here pretty soon. When I'm seeing him operate at right tackle, I'm pretty impressed on how fluid his kicks are and how quickly he's able to redirect for his size. But he's a heck of a teammate, and I've enjoyed playing next to him and with him on the O-line.
You mentioned a lot of individual improvement from guys. Has anyone stood out to you as making a big jump, and especially those freshmen working any of them?
All the freshmen have definitely improved. It's funny to see those guys make it through summer workouts and like, oh, wow, I'm in the mix already. And then they get thrown into a 12-hour fall camp practice day. And so obviously we're talking about Tro and Tree and Jatavius and Campbell Van Diver. I think we got one more in there that I'm forgetting, but those guys have done a heck of a job acclimating to the grind that is fall camp. And so I'm excited to see what they could do.
So there you go. Nick Gargiulo from earlier today. Always good just to be able to hear him talk because he gives you a lot. I mean, obviously a smart guy, right? I mean, he's an Ivy League. He went to Yale.
Very well spoken.
He understands. I mean, his knowledge of just when you listen to him, you can just tell his knowledge for the game is like he's got like a PhD, for crying out loud. I know that might sound like, oh God, like Mike's going a little too far fetched, but I don't think it is. Like he sounds like the type of player, like if you told me, 10, 15, 20 years from now, he'd be a head coach of a program, I'd believe that. Or be a coach just anywhere, coaching college football, high school football. He just understands the game. And I think when you hear him speak, not just talking about what he's saying, but when you hear him speak, you can understand why and how he's become a leader for this team as quickly as he has. Mix in with the fact that he works his ass off. Mix in with the fact that he's actually freaking good. right? Strong guy. He's become a leader for this team. And that's what they need right now. They need as many leaders up front. And no disrespect to Vershawn Lee and the returning offensive lineman, because Vershawn will certainly be a leader. He's playing center. But losing 3 of your starters from a year ago, losing more than 50% of your starting snaps on the offensive line, you need as many leaders as possible up front. No question about it.
Yeah, and I loved how he talked about the freshmen. I think that's a really good gauge of just kind of how the program is. He spoke very highly of them and just kind of laughing about how them going through fall camp. And I could see, it brought him some joy when he saw that, and just kind of reminiscing a little bit, and maybe even a little gut check, realizing that, maybe, it's his last fall camp, and golly, I'm getting a little old. But I love everything that I've heard from Gargiulo. Obviously, we're about to see the rest of it, but really, really down-to-earth, fun guy. And I think he's a big building block in what you want this offensive line to be, culture-wise and ability-wise. So as we're about to run the rest of this clip.
Well, this is more of the fun clip. There was a rumor going around because, as many of you know, and if you don't, here's a good reminder for you. The Gamecock Central Kickoff Party, 3rd annual, this Saturday. It's going
to be fun.
At Steel Hands Brewing. It's going to be a lot of fun. 3rd annual. There you go. VIP tickets. I don't even know if there's any left right now, but if you want to try, head on over there because there is going to be a long list of VIPs. We're talking Nicholas Harbour is going to be there. Lenora Sellers is going to be there. The Carry-On Joyner is going to be there. The man we're talking about, Nick Gargiulo, he'll be there as well. And the reason why this was all brought up was because Gargiulo has a record that he set. David Cloninger from the Post and Courier, he asked him the question today, trying to get a little bit more information about it. And here's what Nick had to say about this record. Take a listen.
Nick,
how you doing?
Not bad. I understand you've got a burger joint in 5 Points that you like to frequent.
There is so I got to put an end to this speculation because Jack Brown's in 5 Points. I did go break the record there. I did eat 10 burgers. However, someone went there like 3 or 4 days later and rebroke it. So I'm no longer a champion, and I have no intentions of going back after that. You got to try it out. It's a pretty good deal. What I got to do is try and leverage that for an offensive line NIL. That's really the goal. But no success there yet.
So there you go. Nick Gargiulo, the champ, now the former champ. Those Jack Brown burgers, not trying to give free ads away here, but they're pretty good. They're pretty good burger.
They're good. I don't think we have a competing burger sponsor, so Jack Brown's getting a lot of food tonight. Deservedly so, right? I used to stop by on the way back, on my walk back from classes on Tuesday nights, grab a burger on my way back and eat before the show, Mike. So, a shout out to Jack Brown's. And that doesn't surprise me at all that Gargiulo would find his way down there and just set the burger eating record. So good vibes.
Because you got to think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't just the burger. Like, you're eating buns too.
Yeah.
I'll clip that up.
What the record was, like how many burgers it was.
It's just like when we're talking about Kobayashi and Joey Chestnut, it's not just the hot dog. You're eating the hot dog and the bun. I mean, that bread, that will fill you up quickly. I mean, we did the
Jack Brown burgers are double too, I think.
Well, I'm sure he could have got the single. I'm sure he got the single because it was 10.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in high school, we tried to do like a 2-pound challenge at Fuddruckers. Try to get like two burgers, and man, you want to talk about being sick after. Oh, so I mean, obviously Gargiulo is a much bigger individual than I am, but I don't know what that record is. Now we're gonna have to do a little digging.
Next time.
Is it 13 now? Do you think the guy that broke the record?
What was Gargiulo's record? 10?
10.
That's pretty impressive.
Do you think it's 11 now, or do you think that person was able to keep it going and they went for 13 or something like that?
I'm guessing it's probably like 12 or 13 just because they're afraid Gargiulo's going to come back and take his crown. I wouldn't be surprised if that record just, sits for a little bit. Gargiulo is going to focus on the year, but if they finish the year off in a good spot, they're going to be at 5 points, and those Jack Brown burgers are going to that aroma's going to find the nose of.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think. Let's look at the schedule real quick, and we'll pull it up for everybody.
I'm sure it's just burgers, and then he's got drink and fry.
Typically for those challenges, when you're eating like multiple burgers, usually it's just one.
And that's my favorite thing about media days is just asking the offensive lineman the best place to get food. I know Tree gave a pretty good answer for wings. He said D's Wings. I was pretty impressed with. It's a good spot, but yeah. No, it doesn't shock me at all that Gargiulo would formally hold the heavyweight championship of burger eating in 5 points.
So here you go. Here's the schedule for the Gamecocks this fall. Try to expand this a little bit so you don't have to squint your eyes as much. But here's the regular season for South Carolina. So I say this because now I'm kind of interested. I'm like, all right, if I'm Nick Gargiulo, and I'm not saying he's going to be trying to set any burger records during the regular season. However, if we're looking here, okay, you beat North Carolina. All right, that'd be great. Is that record-breaking burger night worthy?
No.
I don't think so. You keep going down the list. I mean, the Georgia game.
Georgia would be good.
Georgia, because you'd be coming back. You'd be coming back late, probably around that midnight hours when you'd be going out into town.
Here's my pick. I think Texas A&M. It's Halloween weekend.
But but that game's in Texas A&M though. That's the problem.
Yeah, because they're gonna fly out. They'll fly out the next day, which is the problem. And then Sunday, I don't know if you're going out on a Sunday.
Oh, I think the easy answer is right here.
Yeah.
You beat Clemson at the end of the year. You're going to have at least
be in 5 points, and that aroma's just going to catch his nose, and he's going to be like, man.
But you're going to have a couple weeks. You're going to have a couple weeks off. Even if you're bowling, right? Even if you're going bowling, you're going to have a couple weeks off. So why not? Why not? Big Red brings up, is Spencer going to take the O-line out for steaks after every win? Well, he did hook them up with that Halls deal. A nice little NIL incentive for the offensive lineman. And I love seeing stuff like that, right? We've heard so much about the cars and NIL opportunities that Spencer Rattler has received, and obviously Juice Wells has received a lot as well. But those two players in particular for South Carolina, when you're talking about football, I've seen it across the college football landscape over the last couple of months where you're seeing teammates start to do this, and they're finding ways to be able to get some of their teammates some NIL deals. So, shoot, you're Spencer Rattler, you're the quarterback, you're looking out for your O-line. I mean, we see this in the NFL all the time, right? You take the O-lineman out for a nice dinner, or, maybe you get them a Rolex, whatever the case may be. Obviously, it's a little different here because we're talking college, but Rattler was able to find a way to take care of his O-lineman, and I love that. So good on Spencer for getting that done. That will be good.
Questions before we close it.
Yeah, I was going to say, Joe, do we have anything else? We're talking all that burger talk over here.
Yeah, and it's a good way to kind of end the show, bring things to a fun little wrap. But yeah, just a couple questions before we take off. Big Red, again, when playing against non-Power 5 schools, do you try and run up the score or just try to get out of the game healthy, or both? I think both. I think you want to see your reserves try to run up the score as much as possible. Not in like the, run it out kind of rude way, but, obviously you're trying to score. You want to see production out of everybody you got. And so you're not going to tell your second string to go out there and just, turn the ball over. You want to see them drive. So that's how I see it, at least.
At least early on in the year, we're not talking about potential playoff pictures or style points and all that kind of stuff, right? And obviously if you're South Carolina, we're talking that way. That would be tremendous. Then that means we're talking about the college football playoff. Now that's obviously being very, very, very optimistic. But when we're talking about non-conference games, especially early on in the year, I don't think it's about scoring a lot of points. It's just honestly about going out there and just being able to execute your offense the same way you would if it was against, say, a North Carolina or a Power 5 team. I think that's what it comes down to. And I'm not trying to have like the generic coach talk, but that's what South Carolina should be focused on when we're talking about week 2. And obviously they got their hands full with week 1, but yeah, if you're able to do those things, we've seen it many, many times over the years, and especially with the new rule that college football has. And I say new, it's been around now the last couple of years, but it's still new in my mind.
Yeah.
Being able to have players play in 4 games or less and where they're still able to maintain their eligibility for the following season if they want a redshirt. If you're able to go out there and you're able to put up 50 plus points, on a team like Furman, that's great. And you get your underclassmen in there. Now, I will say this, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about Furman as we get closer to the season. Furman's a team that is heading into, we talk about polls, they're heading into the season ranked number 6 in the coaches poll for FCS. That is not a team that I would overlook. Now, South Carolina should be able to handle them, but the point being is that is a team that has nothing to lose when they play South Carolina week 2. They have talent on that team, and if you sleep on them, they could give you headaches early on. That doesn't mean I think that Furman's going to win the game, but I think that could be a game that is at least earlier on into the matchup, closer than I think some people expect to be. That's one of those games where you cannot sleep. You can't look at it and be like, man, we're playing an FCS team. All right, this is going to be a piece of cake. No. That's not the case here. That's not the case. And I think if you're South Carolina, going back to your point, Joe, you want to be able to get those younger players into the game. And if you're going back to a phrase that we used earlier, talking about my youth football coach, if you're dicking around early on in this game with this team, there's a possibility where you're not able to get those younger guys as many reps as you would like. So again, that's looking much further down the line, but that's something that we will talk about again when we get to that point when they play Furman.
100%.
Furman. I can't even speak. I keep thinking Fordham in my head.
Yeah. Chris Maples asks, I think in the injury situation, Doty is a no-doubter for number 2, but if we find ourselves in a situation late in the game, we get a chance to pull Rattler to preserve him. Would it not make sense in that situation to get the young freshman sellers in? In my take, I think late in the game, you're going to put in, you're going to cycle through the depth chart. I think Doty will see time before Sellers does, even if it's super late. I mean, unless it's like one of the last drives and you're sending him in there to take a couple knees or maybe go up the middle a couple times, you might see it. But if you have time to actually get the 2s in and rep it out, I think you'll see them.
Yeah, I understand the thought process, Chris, but I think at least if I'm the coach, I'm going to put Doty out there and I want to see him get the majority of the reps, right? And the reason being is, and I use injury and I'm not picking on you. I don't want to talk things into existence or do the reporter jinx, but we'll say if Spencer gets suspended, right? If he's ineligible for a game. In this case, if Rattler is not out there and you throw Doty in at the end, you want to be able to get your number 2 guy to be as prepared as possible. God forbid your starter goes down. God forbid your starting quarterback isn't available for a game at some point. That's how I look at it. With Sellers, though, especially if they decide to use his eligibility this season and they don't preserve it. And what I mean by that is him playing in more than 4 games in the regular season. At that point, then I think you think about possibly throwing him out there a little bit more, because at that point, now it's like, okay, what are we doing with Sellers? He's appeared in 5 games now. Do we want to just let him sit on the sideline and kind of twiddle his thumbs around, or do we want him to throw him out there so he can get some experience, especially when you look towards the future?
Yeah, 100%. Our good friend Fisher Brewer. Fish, thanks for tuning in as always. So who do we think is going to be that breakout player this year? My opinion, Trey Knox. I think Trey Knox is going to have a big year. Josh Simon as well. Obviously, we knew Trey Knox is going to be a big force coming in, and just as a transfer, Josh Simon's going to surprise some people. I think as we get a phone call, I think also at the defensive line, Boogie Huntley is going to have a better year, and then lastly, Terrell Dawkins. I think he's kind of, if he can stay healthy, going to be another name. Mo Kaba, the rest of the linebacker group. I've told you how high I am on this linebacking group as a whole. So if I were to throw a position, I think the linebackers are going to make a splash. But offensively, Trey Knox, Josh Simon. Defensively, give me Terrell Dawkins.
I'm big on Xavier Legette this year. I think Xavier is going to have a big year, really big year. And I also think, too, a sleeper in there is Marion Brown. I think he's going to be able to make an impact just based on what this offense can look like and what I think it can be, the speed that he has. I know some people are going to say Nicholas Harbor. I think with Harbor, and I don't want to get people disappointed, it's a question of how quickly does he come along, right? Like, I don't expect Harbor to be out there week one and be the starter. And I don't think anyone's expecting that. But how quickly can he come along? Because he's got speed. There's no question. He's developing his catching ability. I mean, he's catching rockets out there. Now, that's not to say the kid can't catch a football, and that's not to say that he didn't play with guys that could throw it, but he's catching rockets out there. And as we've seen in practice, look, I know no one wants to report anything negative on Harbor because he's an absolute freak. Actually, he was named the #1 freak today. First time a true freshman that's ever happened to on Brad Feldman's list. He's had a couple drops, which is natural. It's going to happen, especially to a young receiver. It happens to every receiver. No one wants to talk about the negative, though. He's going to have growing pains. It happens. And I think that's why, as you've heard from Shane Beamer going back to SEC media days, some people, and I'm not saying this about you specifically, William, because I'm sure you're not the only one there that is in this camp, but some people need to temper their expectations for him
and I
right
hate to say this, Mike. I just don't think Nick Harbor is going to play as much as everyone thinks he is. I'm like, I hate to be the Debbie Downer in this situation. Like, obviously, we'll see him. He'll be involved, and there will be some flash plays that make us go, "Oh my goodness!" Like, living up to the freak, label. But I don't think he's gonna play as much as people.
They'll find ways. And Travis brings up a little bit too. Look, they'll find ways to get him onto the field. I'll tell you where he's going to make a big impact. Where I can see him making a big impact. I can see him making a huge impact on special teams. And I'm not talking about being a returner. I'm talking on the punt rush, punt block. Because of his size, because of his strength, because of his speed. You want to talk about Beamer ball. You want to talk about Lembo ball. You put a guy out there like Harbor to rush kicks. Are you freaking kidding me? And I know some people are like, well, do we want to I'll tell you, he's got the size, the speed, and the strength to do it. I mean, you want to talk about team. Think about that. You have Harbor coming off the edge, and the team has to worry about that, and maybe they have to send another guy over there, or, they got to keep an extra guy back. Never mind where the possibilities of another guy coming through on the other side for being able to block the punt, but it also holds up the punt team, and it can spring a huge return. We're talking about field position. If you're able to get 15, 20 yards on a return because Harbor's out there and teams are so worried about him that they feel like they have to keep an extra guy back, the impact that he can make on special teams, whether directly or indirectly this year, that is something that people should not overlook.
Put him on the other side too, right? Put him on punt and let him go hit somebody. Let him get downfield and just go hit somebody. I would love to see Nick Harbor as a gunner on a punt.
They'll find ways on offense. They'll find ways, especially as the season goes on. I expect them to find ways if he's continuing to grow in practice. And Fisher Brewer says, to be honest, the wide receiver room is deep right now, so I don't think Nick will get meaningful playing time this year. I think as the year goes on, because of his speed, because of Dal Loggins, just his brain as an offensive coordinator, they can find ways to get him in there. But the point being is temper the expectations. Temper the expectations. Speaking about wide receivers, though, as we wrap things up. I know we have some other questions, but I want to make sure we hit on this. Over the weekend, Shane Beamer, finally, we were able to get some confirmation from the horse's mouth, right? I mean, I know what I put out last week. I said that everything that I was told that it was going to be day to day with Trey Knox, there was nothing serious. And as we found out, it's nothing serious. Now, Knox was supposed to be back at practice yesterday. We weren't at practice from a media standpoint. So all we can do is go off of what we are told. We expect that he's practiced the last 2 days. We will know for sure. I believe it is Thursday is the next media opportunity to view practice for South Carolina. I believe it's Thursday. I'm just going to double check real quick. But the point being is we will keep you updated as far as Knox is concerned. We'll keep you updated as far as Juice Wells is concerned. With Juice, and I know Juice came out yesterday and said, he feels great. He feels great. Thursday, open to the media for the first 6 periods, 9:35 on Thursday. Okay. So that will be when the media will have an opportunity to observe practice the next time. That'll be the 4th practice that we've been able to see. With Juice, what the specific injury is, there's been rumors that have floated around from depending on who you're talking to. I don't want to get into that because unless I know for certain.
Yep.
But as Beamer said, it's a lower body injury, and he expects him to be good to go week 1. As far as Knox is concerned, he just got banged up a little bit.
It's not DEFCON 4, Mike. It's not. It's the world isn't over just because.
Thanks, Shane.
Like,
thanks, Shane.
Yeah, exactly. Like
that's the phrase he used. Yep.
Yeah, it's not DEFCON 4. It really isn't.
And injuries happen. People get banged up, and there's a difference, right? We don't have to do the old spiel of hurt versus injured. It's going to happen. It's going to happen in camp.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of how I saw it. I mean, obviously, like I'm still in Indiana till Thursday, so I mean, I haven't gotten the full kind of feel of how it was once Juice was out. But from everything I gathered, everyone was really, really concerned. From my standpoint, it just seemed like a camp injury. Same thing with Knox. So I wasn't too worried once I heard that they were out.
But it's look.
It is scary. Yeah.
Here's a couple of things I want to say, and it's one thing I mentioned earlier when we talk about injuries and college football injuries in particular. This fan base, I think they have so much PTSD when it comes to injuries during camp, right? I think back to, and we could keep going down the list, but just some of the injuries. You think back to the Luke Doty situation. You think back to the Marshawn Lloyd situation. All these injuries taking place during camp. I understand why there is some PTSD. I understand that there's some PTSD because of how injuries were handled by the former head coach when Will Muschamp was here. And I truly believe that when it came to Muschamp, he was optimistic about his guys being able to get back probably a little too early. But that's a coach, right? Being optimistic. And he's an old school coach. He's cut from the Saban cloth. He's seen guys come back. Every player is different, right? We've used this example before. Jackie Bradley Jr. broke his wrists or whatever. He took a ball off the wrist, and I know Gamecock fans will know a hell of a lot better than I do because I wasn't here during that time period. But he injured his wrist, injured his hand, and it looked like JBJ's career was done as a Gamecock. I believe Ray Tanner, and I'm paraphrasing, but he came out and even said, it doesn't look like JBJ is going to be able to play for us again because of his ability to heal quicker than most people would from that injury. He was able to come back and he made a difference, and the Gamecocks won the College World Series. Another one. So I bring that up because obviously when you're talking about Shane Beamer with his players and being optimistic, yeah, he's going to be optimistic, but you have a timeline in your head that you're given from the trainers. You have a timeline in your head that you also gain from experience of being a coach and seeing different injuries. And it just comes down to how much pain a player can tolerate. That's what it comes down to. Now, as far as Trey's concerned, unless he has any setbacks, he's going to be fine. He's going to be fine out there. Juice Wells, I don't want to make it seem like there is something that you should be concerned about, but he had something a little bit more serious. I mean, I don't want to make it seem like, his leg's going to get cut off here and he's not going to be able to play week 1, but he was dealing with a little bit more. He was dealing with a little bit more from what we've been able to gather. So I expect both those guys to be out there bearing any setbacks, 100%. But I think it's just a reminder too that, and that's the only reason I touched upon it on Twitter the other day about the whole Trey Knox thing. When you see stuff on social media, as far as Gamecock Twitter, take a deep breath, slow down. Okay. Head on over to Gamecock Central. Because if I'm not hearing it, Chris, Wes, one of us is hearing it, and we will get you guys situated. We will get you guys all caught up. And if the world's coming to an end, we'll let you know the world's coming to the end. But right now, everything's good with those two guys.
Next question from Sandman. How in the world is Clemson still ranked 9? Mike, I know maybe are one or two Clemson viewers. CU Tiger fan or whatever, the guy who keeps tweeting at you. We want to know this: how in the world is Clemson still ranked 9? It's a good question. They don't have a lot of depth. The only reason is because the brand of Clemson.
They have one of the best defenses in the country coming back. Really good defense. On top of that, there's a lot of hype surrounding their quarterback. Whether I fully agree with it or not, there's a lot of hype with their quarterback. The other fact is, let's just call it for what it is, the conference itself. Now, I will say this. I will defend the ACC here. The ACC has improved over the last couple of years. It's not as much of a punching bag as it once was. Does that mean that when we look at, okay, I think the SEC has, 6 teams ranked? I could be off. I don't have it in front of me right now. But the ACC has a lot of teams that are ranked this preseason, if I remember correctly. So the whole point being is, I think it's a combination. When we're talking about preseason polls, it all comes down to the eyes of the beholder when you're talking about the voter. Some voters like to look at it as okay, how much from last year am I going to factor into this? It's going to get factored in a lot by a lot of people. Some people are going to look at that, and there are also going to be people that look at it and say, okay, how good can this team be this year? This is where I'm going to have them be. And obviously that doesn't mean, okay, if they think Clemson's going to finish number 1, they're going to put Clemson up to the front. But the point being is you try to play off that. So I think with Clemson, look, I'm not surprised that they're ranked top 10, but at the same time too, they're not, they have talent coming back this season. And when you talk about that conference, even though North Carolina, I know they have their issues on defense.
Virginia Tech, Pitt.
You have Florida State in there, who's on paper a very good team. If they're able to beat some of these teams who they've been able to beat the last couple of years, that's going to set Clemson up. So I'm not surprised by the ranking. And shoot, if you're a Gamecock fan, keep cheering for. I know no one's going to cheer for Clemson that is Gamecock fan, but keep cheering for them because they come to Williams-Brice the last week of the regular season, and regardless of where they're ranked, especially if they're ranked in the top 10, my goodness. I mean, I know they have all these rules coming out about storming the field and that. I can't even imagine South Carolina beating Clemson and Williams-Brice. It's been way too long. If they're able to do that, especially if Clemson's ranked in the top 10, my goodness.
Yeah, shout out to that week. Steven asked, does Lenore Sellers see in the action? Quick answer from me, late in the game. I think you'll see packages. Based on what I've been told, you will see packages with him this year. Now, what does that exactly mean? Is that similar to what we've seen with Dakereon Joyner over the last couple of years? Is it similar to how Tim Tebow was used early on in his career, right? Is it going to be one of those situations? And Lynn says, sorry, I can't pull Pickens Tech. You know what I mean, Lynn, but I hear you. I think based on his progression during this fall camp will determine a lot of that, at least heading into the season. And when you're talking about a week 1 matchup against North Carolina team that, look, they're going to be prepared, or at least they're going to try to be as prepared as they can by spending extra time preparing for Dakereon Joyner, because they know he can play not just running back, but he can play quarterback. They learned that out the hard way. They found out the hard way in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. He can also play receiver. What happens, right? Don't want to give people popsicle headaches here. What happens if you have Rattler in a shotgun, you have Lenoris on one side, you have DK on the other? Who's the ball going to?
I mean, you want to talk about giving defensive coordinators headaches, but that plays a part of it. So I think it just comes down to, does Lenoris earn that trust from this coaching staff? It's not a matter of, is he talented enough? He's talented. And especially if they're asking him to go out there and be part of packages, it just comes down to, can they trust him with the football out there?
Yeah, certainly. Last question. We've gone pretty long tonight. Derek Lott, do you guys think our DBs and safeties are legit this year? Yeah, absolutely. I think Nicky Manwari, DQ Smith, Marcellus Dial,
OD.
Yeah, I mean, really, really, really talented. I think at corner you have probably a higher ceiling of potential, if you will, out of, and I'm saying that because, like, in terms of just guys who haven't necessarily shown it, but have all the potential. Marcellus Dial and OD Fortune are certainly up there. Obviously, we saw the pick 6 against Notre Dame. OD certainly has got the it factor. So does Dial. Dial didn't show as much tape during the Notre Dame game, but this year he's embracing being that number 1 role. So, yeah, they're legit. I think they're less of a question mark than the defensive line. That's for sure.
Just real quickly, because I see, and I'll go back to that, but Morgan brings up they only have 3 teams ranked. I'm assuming you're talking about the ACC. I'm going down the list right now. We have Clemson, that's 1. Florida State, that is 2. At least I'm looking at the coaches poll.
Yeah.
I know that. I'm looking at the wrong one. That's the problem. All right. We have North Carolina. We have Clemson and Florida State. So they have 3.
Yep.
They have 3. Yeah. I mean, look, they're not going to be the SEC.
Nope.
And they could have, and I know it's not going, well, I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but I'm not holding my breath that it's going to happen anytime soon. There's a possibility the ACC could have more ranked teams than the SEC at some point. But does that mean they're a better conference? Certainly not. But my whole point being is the ACC, the conference, it's not as you could say top heavy, but there's more diversity in there, right? I just feel like it's not as much of a cakewalk for Clemson as it used to be. And that's not saying that the conference itself is anything close to the SEC or even the Big Ten, for crying out loud. But yeah, going back to the point, though, I'm not surprised that Clemson is ranked. Talk about DBs real quick, too. You mentioned those. I think with DQ Smith and Nick Eamon-Worry, and Dow Loggins mentioned this at Birdies with Beamer, that's a combination at safety that Dow said when he talked with Rattler. That's probably the best look that you're going to get in terms of being able to be prepared for the NFL, going up against those 2 every day. And you know how I feel about DQ Smith. I've talked about it on the program before, not saying that Nick Eamon-Worry won't take that next step. We expect that, but I truly believe DQ Smith is going to have the breakout year in that secondary group. But one player, too, to mention, talking about nickel, David Spalding.
Yeah.
I remember Spalding came in here, and he started the year at nickel. Carlins Patel ended up being the starting nickel for, I think, like 7 games after that. He's gone through, transitional period, right? Trying to get healthy too. Spalding, he has experience. He's played inside. He'll be asked to play outside, I'm sure, at times as well too. That's the beauty with how Coach Gray develops these defensive backs, that he does a tremendous job where they're used to playing both inside and outside if called upon. So I expect Spalding to be in the mix as well when we're talking about the defensive backs, especially playing that nickel position, but I expect him to play both inside and outside as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Any closing thoughts, Mike?
The only closing thoughts I can have for you guys is that the defensive players, not named yet, we'll have to find out who they are tomorrow, but defensive players are scheduled to speak to the media tomorrow. We will have that for you over on Gamecock Central. In addition to that, as you see in the bottom of the screen, the 3rd annual Gamecock Central kickoff party this Saturday. This Saturday, Patrick Davis and his Midnight Choir will be there singing his big hit song that Gamecock fans love, just the big old cock. The amount of talent that is going to be there this weekend. I'm talking about football talent. Beamer's popped his head in the last couple of years. And that's also another thing we should point to, is that the money being raised this week and goes to the Beamer Family Foundation. It is going to be an awesome night. It's going to be an awesome, awesome night. And this Saturday will also mark the debut of Sandstorm Game Day Lager, an NIL beer by Steel Hands, partnership with the Garnet Trust. You buy beer now, you buy this beer, you're going to be supporting Gamecock student athletes. I mean, Joe, real quick, this is you take the reins real quick. I want to show people something though.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously the beer is a super exciting thing, and the kickoff party, even more exciting, we'll have our good friend Kendall will be back hosting as Mike grabs the can. The can's special, man.
So here's the can. If you're watching,
Pretty lit.
Here's the can. It's a sharp-looking can, real sharp. I tweeted this out, but for those of you who haven't seen it yet, this is the thing that I think is just really cool. I mean, the back of the can, the design looks awesome.
From Lynn.
But see that? The QR code. So you're going to have an opportunity, if you buy a beer or you see it out there, people are going to have an opportunity just to scan that, and it's going to be able to donate to student athletes directly that way to the Garnet Trust. Awesome beer. I don't want to be like a nutritionist here, but, for anyone that's curious, it's 12 ounces, 4.5% alcohol. Nice beer. Good beer. It's a light beer, but it has a little bit more flavor than you would have for a typical light beer, if that makes sense. Not heavy, though, but it's got that, it's got a little bit more flavor in it. But Steel Hands, that's where you can get it, Lynn. They're also going to be distributing them to places across South Carolina that sells Steel Hands beer. So, like you think about Greens and some of the,
my buddy, I've had a buddy text me today and tell me that he saw the lager out at stores already. So you guys can go pick some up, go find some before.
Yeah, they're gonna have if you're going to the party on Saturday, talking with Ashley, who her and her husband do a tremendous job. They own Steel Hands. They've been blown away by the amount of people that have reached out saying, man, like, I got to get this. And different parts of Charlotte, they're reaching out. They want to sell the beer too. And there's going to be some restaurants that's going to be selling it as well. Once I have the full list, and I'm sure that's a list that's going to need to be constantly updated from the sounds of it, because more and more people want to sell this stuff, whether it's in cans or whether it's trying to get it on tap. This is a beer that is going to be, it seems like, throughout the state and heading into North Carolina as well. But if you want to be one of the first people outside of Joe's blacklist guy over here, I don't know what the hell you want to call him, friggin' the black market out here trying to get beer, they're gonna be selling it this weekend, and then it's gonna be hitting the shelves next week. Craig says NA Wine and Beverage sells Steel Hands. I'll look for it. Awesome. And by the way, guys, if you do go out and buy this, right, and I mentioned Greens, Total Wine, wherever you typically get your Steel Hands beer, I don't know what it's going to be like out towards Charleston and, areas that are outside of the Columbia market. But if you go out and you buy it next week, shoot us a message. Let us know where you got yours, because we're going to be curious. I'm going to be curious. I'm going to try to do what I can to find out.
We'll be tweet your review. Let us know how it is.
This is awesome. This is awesome. One more little thing too I want to add. Poor intern Joe here. We're going 90 minutes plus here. We have a big announcement that's going to be coming out soon. Big announcement. I think people are going to really enjoy it. It's going to benefit Gamecock student athletes as well. And it's going to be an opportunity for you guys to connect with student athletes. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. It hasn't been done, to my knowledge, anywhere across the country yet. So that news will hopefully be coming out in the next couple of days. So stay tuned for that as well. If you missed any of our show today, head on over to the Gamecock Central YouTube page, and you can watch this show in its entirety. Or if you're a podcast listener, wherever you listen to your podcast, head on over to the Gamecock Central Podcast Network. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Uwe. We appreciate everyone that tuned in tonight. If you're heading over to Steel Hands this Saturday, come on by. Say hello. We'll have a couple of these bad boys. We'll ding the cans, and we'll enjoy some great music by Patrick Davis. And I don't drink, as William says, I don't drink, but I like the can for the collection. Yeah, this one's empty, William. I'm not going to let you know if it came that way or not. I perform my own stunts sometimes, but in all seriousness, though, if you are going this weekend, be smart. Be smart. I don't want to be someone's parent here and lecturing you. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening that are older than me. You already know it, but be smart this weekend if you head to the Steel Hands Gamecock Central kickoff party this weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed the show tonight, and I hope you guys have a great week moving forward.